Many reviewers of Canon hybrid lenses, like the RF 35mm f1.4L and RF 70 to 200mm f2.8Z lens, failed to point out a unique feature of the aperture ring on these lenses. If attached to Canon R1 or R5 Mark II and future Canon cameras, this aperture ring offers extra capability not previously available from any lens designed for digital cameras. Very fine aperture control. When using the dial or programmable control ring, the minimum change in aperture is 1/3 of a stop of light. The aperture ring is much finer. It changes one stop of light in 15 to 18 steps. It is 15 steps when the aperture is wide and 18 steps when the aperture is narrow. Some of you may ask, is such fine control useful, or is the difference even visibly noticeable? Well, let's look at some images. The first image was shot at true f1.4 using the RF 35mm f1.4L. The second image was shot at a slightly smaller aperture of about f1.45. The difference was much less than 1/3 of a stop of light. Hence, the R5 Mark II selected the same shutter speed and ISO exposure setting. However, we can easily see the second image is slightly darker. While their calculated difference in depth of field is very small at 0.1 millimeters, the blurred area of f1.45 have obviously higher contrast. Similarly, at f16 image is slightly darker than f15.7 and has higher contrast blurred area. If we look at their histograms, their difference in mean value is pretty close to their difference in area of the aperture. Is such small difference useful for photography? I would say the ability to fine adjust the background blur and brightness is giving me more control to take a better shot. While the slight difference in brightness can normally be adjusted in post-production using software like Photoshop, it is not as easy to selectively adjust the contrast in different area of an image. Furthermore, adjusting the exposure using software would yield inferior results at the extreme ends of the luminance range. The brightest part of an image may have one or more channel clipped with no details to recover. Brightening the darkest part of an image would result in more noises. An aperture ring with such fine control can help to optimize the range to be recorded by the camera, with less need to recover details in the extreme range in post-production. Another possible usage is taking pictures for panorama stitching. Traditionally, it is recommended to lock the exposure when taking pictures intended for panorama stitching to avoid sudden changes in brightness from image to image. Since this aperture ring can change the brightness and depth of field so gradually, some slight changes in aperture are possible. This can increase the dynamic range if one side of the panorama picture was brighter. This aperture ring is useful for fast operations. Under AV mode, turning the dot dial is several times slower than turning the aperture ring. The need to move the index finger, typically resting on the shutter button, to turn this dial and then move it back slows down the time to take a shot even more. The user can even preset the aperture before the camera is turned on. Sometimes saving a few seconds of time could mean getting or missing a great shot. A few words about why older Canon cameras are not supported yet. The much finer steps of this aperture ring are more complicated. Depending on whether the aperture ring position is at A or not, the camera sets the aperture differently. The depth of field preview and exposure simulation need to monitor the ring position and change accordingly. This is a lot more work than adding a simple dial or programmable ring. Thanks for watching.